Let's set the stage for a 20-year financial heavyweight bout. In one corner, we've got the undisputed, socially celebrated champion of the American dream, home ownership. And in the other, the scrappy, constantly misunderstood challenger, renting. Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving deep into the raw, unfiltered math of renting versus buying over 2 full decades. We're tossing out the old adages, just the numbers. By the time we wrap up, the way you look at your monthly housing payment is going to fundamentally change. Let's step into the ring.
Right off the bat, we've got to ask the million-dollar question. Is renting really just throwing your money away? I mean, it's classic dogma, right? We hear it from our parents, financial gurus, real estate agents, basically everyone. But today, we're challenging that narrative. Calling rent throwing money away while pretending every dollar you put into a house is a solid investment, well, that requires some incredibly creative accounting. So we're stripping away the emotion and looking strictly at the hard data.
To do this properly, let's meet our contenders. On the left, we've got Ryan the buyer, and on the right, Steve the renter. Financially speaking, these guys are identical twins. They're both 32 years old, they each earn $80,000 a year, and after years of highly responsible decisions, convincing themselves that supermarket brand cereal tastes exactly like the expensive stuff, they've both managed to save exactly $80,000. But their personalities couldn't be more different. Ryan values stability. He wants a backyard that he can get irrationally protective of. Steve, on the other hand, values flexibility. The sheer thought of committing to a 30-year address makes him sweat. He wants options. So, naturally, they take 2 very different paths.
Let's track Ryan's path first and watch just how fast money moves in real estate. Step 1, he finds a house for $350,000. Step 2, he puts down a 20% down payment, meaning, boom, $70,000 is gone. But wait, Step 3, he's hit with closing costs. We're talking lender fees, title fees, and about 46 documents he signs without fully understanding. On a $350,000 home, those run you right around $10,000. So Step 4, before Ryan has unpacked a single cardboard box, his entire $80,000 life savings is completely, 100% gone. But what about his monthly costs? Well, this is where the real shocker lies. Ryan takes out a 30-year fixed mortgage at 7%. His total monthly housing cost clocks in at about $2,653. Now listen closely to how that payment actually breaks down in month 1. A massive $1,633 goes straight to mortgage interest. Another $790 goes to property taxes, insurance, and maintenance. The actual principal, the part that's building his wealth, just $230. Think about that. Out of over $2,600, a mere $230 is actually buying the home. Here is the absolutely crucial point. Let this sink in for a second. Yes, rent builds no equity. We all know that. But pretending that mortgage interest, property taxes, and fixing a leaky roof are somehow investments is sheer creative accounting. The vast majority of Ryan's early payments are sunk costs. They are gone forever. Honestly, just like rent. Okay, let's move over to Steve and see how his countermove sets him up. Steve decides to rent a comparable 3-bedroom home right nearby for $2,000 a month. Remember, Ryan is paying $2,653. That leaves Steve with an extra $653 in his pocket every single month. Now, for a brief, fleeting moment, Steve considers using that cash for an epic trip to Thailand, but he resists the temptation. Instead, Steve takes that original $80,000 he didn't use on a down payment, plus that $653 monthly difference, and he aggressively invests every single dollar of it into a broad stock market index fund. His money is now actively working for him in the market. So the stage is totally set. Ryan's wealth is tied up in property and leverage, while Steve's wealth is tied to the stock market and compound interest. Let's sprint through the next 2 decades of their financial lives, checking in on them at year 3, year 10, and finally, year 20. Coming up to the year 3 checkpoint, it is a remarkably tight race. Ryan's been steadily paying his mortgage, sure, but he's also learned the hard way that every strange noise in a house has financial consequences. He literally just spent a Saturday completely failing to fix his water heater using a YouTube tutorial and ended up having to pay a professional anyway. Still, assuming modest home appreciation, Ryan has built roughly $120,000 in home equity. And Steve? Well, he's paid out $72,000 in rent that he will never see again. But assuming a 10% average market return, his original savings plus those monthly investments have grown his liquid portfolio to about $130,000. So at year 3, they are neck and neck. Jump ahead to year 10. Our contenders are now 42 years old. Ryan is walking around his property with the swagger of a man who feels like he owns at least half the bricks. His equity is sitting near $250,000.
And crucially here, his principal and interest payments are totally fixed. Meanwhile, Steve is still winning the pure asset race with a portfolio nearing $290,000. But Steve's got a new problem on his hands. You see, his landlord is also a big believer in compound growth. With rent increasing around 3% a year, Steve's monthly rent has crept up from $2,000 to nearly $2,700. The math is definitely starting to shift. Fast forward to year 20. Steve is 52 years old. Because he let that original $80,000 compound, and because he relentlessly invested his savings during those early years when his rent was still cheaper, his liquid portfolio has absolutely exploded. Assuming that same 10% average annual return, Steve is now sitting on a staggering $750,000. No joke. This is the sheer dramatic power of opportunity cost and compound interest at work.
So, at the 20-year finish line on pure net worth alone, Steve takes the crown. He's got $750,000 in highly liquid assets. Ryan, on the other hand, has roughly $660,000 in home equity. But their day-to-day realities right now are incredibly different. Steve's rent has compounded to a whopping $3,600 a month, and the scary part, it has no finish line. Ryan, meanwhile, only has 10 years left until the bank is completely out of his life. However, Ryan's wealth is entirely trapped in drywall and roofing. He can't exactly sell 8% of his kitchen if he suddenly needs cash.
Now, lean in closely for this next part. This is the massive behavioral twist of this entire explainer. The spreadsheet assumes discipline. Human beings often have other plans. Steve's massive financial victory comes with a deadly serious condition. It only happened because he actually invested the difference every single month for 20 straight years. Through market crashes, through bad news, and through the constant temptation to just upgrade his lifestyle. If Steve had spent that extra cash instead of investing it, his advantage completely vanishes into thin air.
A mortgage ultimately acts as a forced savings account. The bank decides Ryan is going to build equity every month whether he wants to or not, and behaviorally speaking, that is a massive advantage. But Ryan accepted some really serious trade-offs for that stability. He gave up time. If he had needed to sell early, those transaction costs would have absolutely crushed him. He gave up mobility, since it's difficult and costly to just pack up and move. He took on concentration risk, meaning his wealth is tied up in one single house on one single street. And of course, liquidity. Home equity is wealth, for sure, but it is remarkably hard to spend without borrowing against it.
So, knowing all this, how do you actually decide your own path? Let's strip away the societal pressure for a second and look at some actionable frameworks. First off, how long are you staying? If it's less than 3 to 7 years, the heavy transaction costs of buying will almost certainly punish you. Second, you have to be brutally honest with yourself. Will you genuinely invest the difference if you rent, or will you just spend it? Finally, go check the price-to-rent ratio in your specific city. You just divide the home's purchase price by the annual cost to rent a similar place. In our example, a $350K house divided by $24,000 in annual rent gives you a ratio of about 14.6. When that ratio climbs above 20, the math heavily starts favoring renting. Which brings us to our final takeaway. Neither choice was automatically smart, and neither was automatically stupid. 20 years later, the financial difference between Ryan and Steve didn't actually come down to whether they bought or rented. It came down to what they did after making that decision. Ryan needed to stay put for the math to work out. Steve needed relentless, robotic discipline for the math to work out. It's all about trade-offs and truly understanding the real numbers behind them. So, looking at your own life and your own level of financial discipline, which path will you take? Thanks for joining me for this explainer. I hope this helps you master the math of your own housing decisions.